Hello and welcome back to CTOCon 2023. We're happy to have you all here for yet another insightful session. The topic today is not a happy one, but it is an important one nonetheless. Estimates suggest that there have been more than 150,000 layoffs in 2023 alone, and 250,000 since 2022 across the globe due to the recent economic climate. Companies like Google and Microsoft and Amazon have laid off more than 70,000 people in the last year, and it's been much worse for smaller companies. Today, we'll be talking about why this happened, what we can learn from it, and how we can avoid it in the future. I'm delighted to be introducing the panelists we have today who've taken the time out to share their thoughts on the matter. Firstly, we have Cassandra Wilcox, who is CTO of Statuspere, and we have Touseef Liaquat, who is founder and CEO of Algolab. Cassandra, we'll start with you. If you could just take a moment to introduce yourself and talk about Statuspere a little bit.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me at CTOCon. I'm excited to be here. My name's Cassandra Wilcox. I'm the CTO at Statuspere. I've been there for the last 3 years. Statuspere does consumer to consumer marketing at scale. So that means we can get thousands of creators posting about your brand each month, saving a lot of teams' time, so they don't have to have internal influencer marketing teams or really deal with any part of the process. And then I also write about my experience as an early stage startup CTO on Substack. My blog is called Early Stage CTO, and I just like to pull the curtain back on what it's like to work at an early stage CTO or at an early stage startup, especially as like a first-time CTO or technical or non-technical founder. Thanks.
Thanks, Cassandra. Touseef, over to you.
Thank you, Zan, for inviting me. And I'm very happy to be here at CTOCon. My name is Touseef. I am a founder of a company called Algolab, in which I train software engineers and data engineers to unleash their powers and become better engineers and grow in their careers. So I have been running this company for almost 1 year now. Before this, I worked at Meta and some other big companies in Seattle area. But my passion has been software engineering and teaching for a long time, and that's what I am doing right now. Yeah.
Fantastic. It's Cassandra, Touseef. It's wonderful to have you guys here. We'll jump right into the questions. Cassandra, we'll start with you. So it's been pretty brutal. It's been really bad. I'd like you to jump into some of the reasons why this has happened, some of the mistakes that perhaps these companies have made. Why are we in this situation right now?
Yeah. I just want to start off by, echoing what you were saying. It's a very heavy topic. I felt a lot of heavy feelings as I was preparing for this because my company Statuspere did layoffs in July of 2022. We laid off about 18 or 19% of our staff. And so I'll be speaking from that experience, as an earlier stage startup and like why that happened for us. Really for us, we're a venture-backed startup. So like most venture-backed startups, we're spending more than we're making in revenue. Statuspere's always been like a pretty conservative company. We've always had pretty high revenue. But, even before, I guess I'll just start by saying like the main reason we had to do layoffs is that, it was really recommended to us by our investors and our advisors because the greater economic trajectory was very uncertain. And we thought we might be headed for a recession. And so like venture capitalists were pulling back. And we were told, we may not be able to raise our next round as soon as we would think. So the recommendation is basically extend runway as much as possible. So yeah, we were very proactive. We acted very early. And the reasoning being like, basically, I don't know if you listen to the All In podcast is basically saying, if you're not cutting at least 15% of people, you're not being a responsible business. So there was just like a lot of pressure on us to do that, to be a good startup, to rein it in. Like I said, we were always very conservative, even prior to layoffs. And, we were actually being criticized for not being aggressive enough with growth. And so we did kind of push ourselves a little bit And so essentially, yeah, once investors said, hey, we're not writing checks anymore, we're not giving startups as big of a valuation, you may not be able to raise your next round. It's like you take a look at where your spending is at. And unfortunately, it's mostly people. So we did look at like a lot of ways to cut spending, to increase revenue, to basically reduce our burn. And there wasn't really a way around cutting people. And it was awful because we need those people. They were great people. So it was really just unfortunate. And, from my perspective, yeah, we did it before we actually even saw perceivable market conditions changing. So I don't know if this is true of all, tech companies, big tech necessarily, but for us, and I think a lot of smaller startups, it was just like, this is what we're being told to do, because if you don't do it, you might fail. And if you do it, you'll grow slower, but you'll stay in business longer. So that was the whole reasoning behind it.
Yeah, it's definitely the smaller companies, the VC-backed companies are facing the brunt of it. Touseef, same question, over to you.
So I think there are different reasons for startups and different reasons for big tech companies. So I agree, Cassandra, that the companies, the burn rate is one of the biggest challenges for startups, and they need to conserve money if they think in the future they will not be able to raise money. So in 2001, I was working at Airbnb before two of my startups. I used to work at Airbnb, and at the start of pandemic, they needed to lay off 1,700 of their employees. So I was impacted by that layoff. And at that time, it looked like Airbnb was in a big trouble because all the revenue, because people stopped traveling, and so they were limited on, and there was nothing. No, it looked like world is going to crash, and because the COVID is going to keep going, and so they needed to make a hard choices and reduce their cost so that they can sustain for a whole year or more, 2 years. And by cutting 1,700 people, like laying off 1,700 people, they almost saved $1 to $2 billion for that year, and be able to use that money for for other things. But for companies like Microsoft or Google, the things are a little different. I think they overhired a lot of people, and now they have a lot of pressure from investors, shareholders. They want to get some um, 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 profits, and so you might have seen the letter got by Google from some investor that you still need to cut more people so that we can get more value out of our shares. But if you see how much investment these big companies are doing in other places, like Microsoft just bought or did acquisitions and investments in OpenAI, and Google is also doing. So it's not about cash reserves for big companies, but for smaller companies, definitely the burn rate is the most important thing for them to survive even, right? So I think these are two. We have to see which company is at what stage to see how they are behaving in these situations.
All right. Which brings me to the next point. Like, as I understand it, companies that have to go through this process, it's there's I mean, as an employee and as a founder, both situations are really, really horrible to be in, right? It's an incredibly hostile environment. Nobody wants to be a part of it. Um, what happens with the people who are left after the cut has been made? Is there like a fall in morale? How do you motivate them to go out and do their job 110%? It must be really difficult. Cassandra, will start with you.
Yeah. So, yeah, following our layoffs, I'd have to say, I don't know if this is like a long time or not a long time. Like, this is my first time through layoffs, but it obviously it came as a surprise because, for this sort of thing, it's not in really anyone's interest to be talking about it like we may not. We're not really sure what we're doing. So when we did finally let the greater company know, it came as a big surprise. So even to the people who stayed, they kept their jobs, but like all of a sudden their team is half gone or whatever it is. So like for 2 weeks after, and I can mostly speak for my engineering teams, not so much for the rest of the company. I think some teams didn't experience any loss of team members, but it was a good 2 weeks where, we were just dealing with the devastation of, we were hustling pretty hard towards some deadlines, and now we have like half the resources to do it. Like, did what we were doing really matter? And am I next? Like those questions were like in everybody's minds. And so we didn't really like expect everyone to just get back to work. We were kind of like, we need to regroup first of all. Like, the context has completely changed. So for a good 2 weeks, we didn't really expect any output, and we kind of didn't really have a timeline for it. I think the good news is we've got a pretty good culture. I'm a big proponent of transparency. So I was transparent with everyone on my team about like my frustrations. I didn't try to paint this picture of like, you know what, this is best for the company and we're going to be better for it. And, let's just go team go. I think it's really important to acknowledge the elephant in the room. Like, hey, this is frustrating for all of us. Like it really does create a lot of these concerns. And so we had a lot of conversations, open, transparent conversations about that. And we listened. And I would have to say, honestly, I was hoping everyone would be very understanding. I wasn't expecting it, but, we did actually come back stronger as a team because it was something that was affecting all of us. It wasn't like management versus employees. I think that was partly because of how we handled the layoffs. I think we did better than any other company I've heard of. I can talk about that later. But yeah, as far as like keeping morale up, mostly just saying like, hey, like we're all hurt by this. Here's what we're doing for those who left. And let's take the time we need to regroup. Let's understand, what we're dealing with and move forward in a way that acknowledges the elephants in the room and doesn't just ignore them and say, get back to work.
Yeah.
Well said. Well said. Touseef?
So I think it starts from even before the layoffs. The employers has to have an empathy and also show that empathy that they are doing whatever they can to avoid this thing, and putting all the efforts, like trying every avenue to make sure that they have done everything to help these employees not get laid off, right, and survive without that. And that showing enables employees to see, yeah, our management, our leadership has done everything they could have done. They tried different avenues. So when Airbnb was laying off, our CEO used to have weekly sessions with the whole team in which he will describe different scenarios, and we were told what they have been doing, right? And so when the layoffs were announced, it was not a like sudden shock for us. It was we understood what is happening in the economy, what is happening with the company. I loved Airbnb, and all the other people. We all loved Airbnb because of how the culture was set up there. And so even I was let go. I was sad and everything, but I also see where this company is coming from. But if you look at some other companies who are laying off, right? So at this time, Microsoft has announced layoffs of 10,000 people or more, but it has not said which employees are getting laid off. And so now all these 100,000 or more than 100,000 people are on a chopping block. They don't know who is going to get that email. That is horrifying. That is brutal way of letting go somewhere. I really, and how this morale will translate to other employees, right? Who left, who are not being laying off, right? So for next few months, the whole culture, Microsoft has been spending a lot on building very inclusive culture for last few years after Satya came. But I think all of that effort has been down in the drain feel like that how they handle this thing. And so starting with how you start the whole conversation, making sure that you are putting the employees in part of the process. And then afterwards, I think definitely the trust is broken. Many employees now feel, even if they are not let go, they are feeling that their trust is broken. So now for the management and leadership, they should be building that trust. And how we build trust by bringing more, doing some promises and fulfilling those promises. When you do those things, then start building the, the trust again. Yeah.
Right, well said. And both of you touched upon this topic, and I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into it, which is what's a humane way of doing it? How can you set up a process and have practices that ensure that this is being handled in a fair and respectful manner, and the most which can be done is being done. Cassandra, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think when you're approaching how to do a layoff, there's a few considerations. One, I think your options are impacted by the size of your company. Statuspere is a smaller company. We were 60 people. So we were able to do some things that would be much less feasible for much larger companies. So for example, we had a meeting in the morning to kind of let the whole company know what was going to happen that day. That was just, I mean, that's an awful thing to have to do. It's like, hey, everybody, you showed up for work today. And we're a remote company, so we're just all on a video call and just saying, hey, we're doing layoffs today, unfortunately. And then we let everyone know, like, if you're affected, you're going to get an invite to a meeting. So already there's like some suspense there. So, but what we did was we sent one-on-one invites to everyone who was affected. So I was really grateful that we were able to do that, have the one-on-ones with everyone. And so we had the one-on-ones. And again, I think, it goes back to what you were saying about like how you set things up ahead of time. Like we had a good culture, I think. And so we had a lot of trust built. So when it came time to do this, everyone knew that we had their backs as much as we could. So I was even surprised during those one-on-one meetings how many people were very understanding and saying, this must have been really hard for you. And I'm like, what an amazing thing to say when you're letting someone go from their job. Like that's devastating to their livelihood. So I feel grateful for that. And again, I attribute it mostly to like our culture and how we built strong trust ahead of time. And then the other thing that we did remove everyone's access to like company logins and tools like that pretty immediately, because that's just the responsible thing to do as a business with customers and protecting your customers and things like that. But we let everyone have access to Slack through the end of the day so that they could talk to their teams, say goodbye, and exchange contact information, and just kind of like be able to, build that. It was nice. Everyone pretty much had nice things to say. We had people monitoring channels for anything inappropriate or dangerous, but that didn't happen. Again, I think it's because we're a smaller company and we have a pretty strong culture. So that is possible. And again, I feel a lot for like the bigger companies where that's really just not feasible. So yeah, that's my story.
Thanks for sharing that, Cassandra. Sorry, Touseef, please continue.
Yeah, I do agree. I say that, yes, for smaller company, it will be much more easy to manage and be able to help individuals. But for bigger company, it becomes more and more infrastructure and issue with how to handle all these things. But I think if if the management and leadership show that they care about people, then those people who are going, they do understand. Most of the people want to be respected and they want to respect others as well. And so when you give them respect, even if they are going out of the door, and do whatever you can do to help them in their next in the transition. I think those people will feel okay going and then being actually saying those words which Cassandra heard in one in her one-on-ones. So what can you do when you're letting some people go? Thinking about what are the different situations these people might be having. For example, if somebody is on visa and they only have 90 days to find another job, otherwise they will be deported. Or somebody has kids in daycare and now they have to get the kids out of the daycare because they cannot pay for the daycare. So how you as a company can support them? Or somebody is in disability and how hard for them will be to find a new job. Thinking about individuals and finding ways to help, I think that's very important. And caring, that comes from the care. It's not like a business decision, it's more of that you care and you do whatever, even if you don't have budget to do many things. Insurance is very important. So Airbnb, for example, gave insurance for whole year for all employees. Like they paid the premium for the whole year, and so that was a big relief for me that I don't have to worry about, because in US the insurance is one big budget item. And providing a support group, and we had a Slack group created for us where all the alumni were there and and so people were helping each other in supporting, creating other resource groups, providing trainings for these people to get the new job, like how to prepare for interviews or upskilling so that they can go and find a new jobs. I think that I think all it comes down to caring, that you have show great care and think about all the individuals who are going out of your company and what can you do for them.
Yeah, yeah, well said, well said. So now that all of this has happened, I personally, I think the world as we know it has changed, right? With in terms of the perception with which investors would invest in startups, so on and so forth. And I really hope um, and as I see it, there are a lot of positives to be taken out of it as well. It did seem to be some sort of a bubble, if you will. But what are and also I really hope there wasn't a guy like me sitting in 1939 saying the exact same thing, and then we all reverted back to the same systems. But what are some of the lessons that companies and specifically tech companies can learn from all of this? Cassandra, we'll start with you again.
Yeah, I think for venture-backed companies, like questioning that growth at all costs mindset. I mean, I see why it's attractive to investors. You know, they have a portfolio of companies. They don't need everyone to succeed. But as a startup founder, you know, I think if we found ourselves in this place again, or, you know, when we're fundraising and investors are saying you should be more aggressive, spend more, you know, look at them and just say, actually, like, you know, stick to our guns a bit more on that. Like it's not necessary and it's not necessarily in our best interest, you know, it's in their best interest. So not, you know, not necessarily letting the venture capitalists control how you run your company if you are more comfortable being conservative. You know, I don't know. I'm in the startup world for the first time, and I'm questioning a lot of this like expectation of hockey stick growth, because how realistic is that? And if it works for a few, what does that mean for everybody else? So I would definitely question that strategy. And the lessons learned. Yeah, I think that's my big takeaway, is questioning growth at all costs and really looking at your company and what makes sense for you, and not just following suit with what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, well said, Cassandra. Touseef, over to you.
So in last 2-3 years, the investors have been investing a lot of money, and now it's called easy money. That it was very easy to raise money and get extra money for startups. So that has gone. Now nobody is going to give you money just for calling your startup as a crypto startup or calling yourself as a new AI startup. Actually, for AI startups, there will be now many people investing because they have just AI in their tagline. But The money is hard. You need to make sure that you are not um, spending more than what you need to be, and being conservative, and thinking about for 1-2 years runway, and making sure that you can sustain that. There is no need to go and just keep spending money just to show the revenue and get the next investor. That's what, like, show growth, get the new investor, show growth, get the new investor. That is not sustainable, that we have seen. And yeah, I think many investors are also, I think, now pushing startups to be conservative in that respect. So I think people uh, will be doing better, hopefully doing better this time in this year.
Yeah, not falling in the same patterns. Yeah, that totally makes sense, and absolutely, Cassandra, what you said about like hockey stick growth and achieving it at all costs is has um, shown us what the negative impacts can be worldwide. Like you talk about any country in the world, and you have like a lot of logistics startups have gotten impacted. I'd also like to touch upon the role of senior leaders and managers during this process, because we have a lot of engineering leaders and like future engineering leaders in the audience as well. And I'd like to talk about any process that you could set up, or what their role is and how they can approach this entire thing with regards to deciding who stays on, who doesn't, because we've seen a lot of different things taking place. For instance, you see a lot of customer service representatives getting laid off, but at the same time, there are companies that are also laying off entire technical departments, which typically are the last ones to go. Just to clarify my question a bit further, so how do like senior leaders approach this situation? Cassandra, do you want to go first?
Yeah. How do senior leaders approach, who to cut, what to cut, how much to cut? A big thing for us is we didn't want to have to do it twice, so we cut pretty deep. What was like frustrating for me as the technical leader was that it was just seen that our technical staff was more expensive than a lot of our other staff, and that was fewer people had to be cut in order to cut the amount of burn needed. So that was a consideration, not my favorite consideration. So sometimes like even you have to negotiate as leaders, like what are you going to cut and why, and it's not the same for every company. And so we made some decisions. We had to keep our salespeople. We had to keep. We made a lot of cuts in marketing. We made a lot of like a significant cut in tech. Yeah, I think just thinking through not just like bottom line now, but like trajectory, like how are we going to achieve what we said we're here to achieve with way fewer resources? And if we make these cuts, and I guess for other leaders that may not be in the C-suite, like you may not learn about these cuts until later. And so your role there is to really I think ask a lot of questions, understand how the decisions were made, because it's going to be up to you to communicate that to your teams, because that's going to be how you build trust and create that transparency. So yeah, I would say there wasn't unanimity in the decisions that were made, at Statuspere about who we cut. But I think we did the best we could, And as I'm still very supportive of everyone on my leadership team, even if I wouldn't have made the same decisions. So,
I understand.
yeah, being supportive of everyone that has to make these difficult decisions, even if it's not exactly what you want.
Yeah, I get it. Touseef, over to you.
So if you are not in a C-suite or in an executive position, then most of the time you don't get to know about who is getting laid off. But I think the job for you should be to be transparent on both upward and downward, so that you can help the leadership make the right decision, and also in the bottom, in your employees who are reporting you, help them understand what you are hearing. If you keep the communication going between both ways, I think that will help leadership know what are the critical parts, and what we need to keep to survive the business and keep the business running. I and if you don't do that job, it could be that your team is the person who is very critical to your business, and they are on layoff, and now you will be in trouble finding a replacement or getting a new hire again afterwards. So transparency, communication, I think that is more very important to have this better transition new world.
Got it. Got it. Touseef, Cassandra, thank you so much for your time today. That's it for this panel. It was really great having you both here, and it was really lovely hearing your thoughts on the matter. So yeah, thank you so much for your time, and that's it from this panel. Thank you, and bye bye.
Thank you for having us here. Take care.
Thank you.